Welcome, everybody, to the Schmoeville podcast. I'm super excited to get started tonight. This is a podcast, if you've never heard us before, where we basically just recap the week that was in Schmoes Know and Collider video. We're happy you're here. My name is Ryan Snelling, your host. I am joined by my co-host, Brian Davids. What's up, buddy?
Snelling, call me Umberto Davids, because I've been breaking scoops all week, from John Campea's return to movie talk to the Passengers reshoots, and I'm excited to begin the holiday weekend here in Schmoeville.
That's right. We got our name on Collider Video, I think, for the very first time. And that makes sense because, you know, we don't just talk about the live show. We talk about Collider on here, too. So it was nice of them to shout us out. And well done, by the way, for getting that scoop on Movie Talk. Congratulations.
Thanks to Christian for that. I mean, he didn't have to run with that, but I was the first person to catch Anna Faris's slip-up on her own podcast about the Passengers reshoots, and it's been awfully strange that there's been no material for that movie, so I'm not a big reshoots worrier. I don't really care too much, but in this case, there were a lot of questions about that movie, so.
I definitely thought that was worthy of Movie Talk, so bravo.
Thank you.
Very good job. And yeah, I don't know if we can take all of the credit for knowing about Campea. We might have had a little insider knowledge, but yeah, I mean, we thought that was going to be it, and sure enough, we did get the news that Campea was going to be on. So.
Hey, speak for yourself. I saw the tea leaves from a mile away.
Oh, did you? Man.
I mean, I came on this show, and the first thing I said was, it's Campea. And then there may have been some winking and nodding here and there.
Sure. We're going to talk a lot about Campea, and we're going to talk a lot about Collider here at the top. But first I want to address something, and, you know, I didn't really tell you that I was going to talk about this beforehand, but so you can throw in your 2 cents whenever you'd like. But for one, everybody, thank you so much if you engage with us throughout the week on Twitter or what have you. We definitely appreciate it. We love seeing all the great YouTube comments as well. I think people are starting to get a lot more active with the Schmoeville podcast, and we greatly appreciate it. We're loving the response from you guys, and it just makes us feel good. It makes us feel warm and cozy inside. But I do want to address something, and I've tried to publicly post it on Twitter. That way other people can see it. But, you know, not everybody's looking at my Twitter, and that's fine. I understand that. A lot of people are asking me if and when they can come on the Schmoeville podcast. So I figured I would just set the record straight right now. So this podcast started with Paul and I, and then Paul had to take a hiatus. And in that time, I was constantly, weekly, looking for people to help me do the podcast. And I met a lot of great people through Schmoeville podcast that have been on here before. But we've had a lot of discussions, Christian and I, about what the show needs to be and what suits it. What's the best thing for the Schmoeville podcast? And, you know, Brian came along, and me and you were getting along great. So I really think that what we have between Brian and I is the show. So currently we're not looking for other guests. I mainly want to build my relationship with Brian, and I think we have got something really good going on for ourselves. So right now, and I don't know if it'll ever happen, never say never, but as of right now, the Schmoeville podcast is just going to be this, and we will get some of the schmoes. I think those are the people that you want to hear from. So anyway, we're just thinking about the quality, what's best for the show. Brian commits himself to this programming. He's extremely insightful. He keeps me on my toes, so I greatly appreciate it. You're my crutch. You're my rock, Brian. So I just wanted to address that. But again, I thank everyone who's asked me. I appreciate it, and I'm glad that you love the show so much. But I feel like this is what it needs to be between me and Brian. So, but anyway, thank you very much for all the people who have asked to come on. So.
Yeah, and just to remind people, a couple weeks ago when I first appeared, I was not expecting to be on this full time, but Christian DM'd me and said that I should be. So it was completely by surprise that this happened. And if some of you are upset about not having your chance, you know, I'm sorry about that, but I'm still going to give you my best, as will Snelling.
Absolutely, for sure. So just no hard feelings, but I just think this is the show, as George Costanza famously said in The Office at NBC. This is the show.
Me.
But anyway, thank you, and let's talk about Campea. Because the news came out and we talked a little bit about it last week, but it's a fish. It is fish that Campea is now running Movie Talk, and only Movie Talk. So when that came out, we talked a little bit about, how you felt if Campea was going to be there, but now that Campea is there, what are your thoughts?
Well, he had this Facebook Live video where he talked about the return on a more personal level. He did a video with Christian as well on the Collider Facebook Live, but mainly there were a lot of points on his personal one today or yesterday that I felt are worthy of discussion. He led off the video basically by saying that Movie Talk views are down since he left. Now, first off, what do you think of that statement, and do you think it's true? Because I've done some research and some digging.
There was an asterisk beside that. He didn't say that it was because he left. He didn't say that it was their fault, or he was basically just saying that since he's left, there's been inconsistency. So I don't think he was making a point that it's because of me.
Fair enough, and there may be some hint that he might have something to do with it, but he went on to say, because there's not a consistent host and not a consistent face like there was for many years with him, it could be part of it. But back in the AMC days, AMC Movie Talk would get between 60 and 80,000 views per episode. Now Collider is comfortably between 80 and 100,000, while there are some breakout episodes that have 140, 150,000. For example, the return of Campea and Jeremy Johns a couple weeks ago. The first one, 150,000 views. The very next one, the next day, 90,000. So it's up and down, and a lot of it, from what I can tell, I've studied these numbers extensively. From what I can tell, it's topic driven. So if there's a big piece of news that drops, that episode has an above average amount of views, but usually it's between 80 and 100,000. And I'm sure Campea can bring more consistency, but I just think it's a hard thing to measure at this point, when last time he was full-time, we had The Force Awakens, we had Oscar buzz, so that was some of the biggest movie events of the year, news-wise.
So let me just say this. That was a little bit of Bernie Sanders. Now let me just say this. No, I personally check out of Movie Talk when someone like Dennis hosts. And I think that mainly is like on Fridays he usually hosts, right? So Fridays I usually don't even watch Movie Talk. I mainly watch it when Ellis and Christian are hosting. But I do like agree with his point. I like Dennis. I don't think he's strong on camera, but I mean, he doesn't have to be, so I'm not saying it's required that Dennis does better, really, but I do think the point is with consistency. I sort of agree with Campea, and the fact that when Campea decided to leave, I was like really kind of upset. Like I talked about it before. I wrote that open letter to him when I found out he was leaving, because he meant a lot to me, and I couldn't believe that he was gone. I mean, it's not the same. I'm not saying it's bad, but it's just not the same without him, and I'm really happy that Movie Talk is getting Campea-fied again. Do I think it will benefit the show? Absolutely, I do. So, even if that is what he said, that it's because of him, I would kind of probably maybe agree with it, even though it's pretty honest and blunt and direct. I don't know. So, but I do see the point that people might not watch Movie Talk as much because it's a little inconsistent, or they don't like when someone is on the panel or when someone is hosting in particular. So,
last Friday, Clark, Ellis, Dennis, Natasha. The lead story was Steve Rogers is no longer Captain America. 140,000 views on a Friday. And it's not that big a story. I mean, people may have already figured this out based on Civil War, but any given day, you can have a huge episode that defies all odds, defies the usual numbers. So will Campea bring consistency? I think so. I like the consistent face. I like the term showrunner that they're throwing around. Clark's the showrunner of Nightmares.
Yeah.
Schnepp's the showrunner of Heroes. Christian's the showrunner of Jedi Council. It's only fitting that Campea is the showrunner for Movie Talk.
I agree. It makes absolute sense.
And as I speculated last week, the only way he was going to come back and do this was if somebody else was doing the heavy lifting. So Dennis is still doing the heavy lifting. Mark Reilly is still writing the show notes. That saves John a ton of time because he used to do what Reilly is doing, what Dennis is doing himself.
Right. Have you ever heard of anyone saying that they don't watch Movie Talk because of who's like hosting? Like Ashley or Sinead or Natasha? Like, is anyone on Earth thinking that?
I doubt it. But that being said, Natasha potentially may not be a host once John comes back on board. There's a little bit of murky waters in that regard. Yeah. I think she's strongest in the Collider news department. And
yeah, I do too. And I think not in a mean way. I think she's going to get the boot from Movie Talk. I think they're just going to stick with Ashley mainly. And then, of course, Sinead on Fridays or whatever. Natasha, when she hosts, I feel like she has no idea what anyone is talking about. Like, I've
got a theory on this.
I'm not convinced at all that Natasha knows anything about the movies that they discuss daily on Movie Talk. I'm just not convinced at all.
Look, Ashley and Sinead are old school, and they fit well within that format. And they are not afraid to show their personalities. They're very free-spirited girls, ladies, gals, women. Natasha, I feel like she's holding back her true personality, and she comes from the pageant world, so right. I think she's used to putting on a performance and not showing everything to people. But on this show, I think you need to drop the shell a little bit and kind of let it all hang out, because everybody else is. I mean, everybody has worked with each other for a long time, and they're not afraid to make farting noises, make rat faces. But Natasha always seems to be the most serious one on that panel when she's on that panel. So I just think she's a better fit for Collider News because she can deliver that more professional approach without having to let her personality overtake things.
Well, I don't know if serious is the word, because she giggles and I don't know, she likes to laugh at the guys, but again, she does feel like she's in a pageant. Like, I totally agree with that. I don't know. I just don't think she offers nearly as much as I think Ashley has the personality and Sinead has the personality, but I'm also convinced that Sinead sees all the movies because she talks about going with her brother a lot. So I think
I feel like I know Ashley and Sinead. I feel like I know Ashley and Sinead. I don't feel like I know Natasha, even though I've been watching her for a year, 13 months.
No, Natasha hasn't been on that long. No. I mean, I've been watching Collider Movie Talk for a little over a year, and I feel like Natasha...
Sinead went on leave around Christmas, I think, so it's almost a year. Almost a year.
It's like 8 months. It's like...
Hey, 8 months, whatever. 9 months, 12 months. You get the point, though. I mean, we've been watching her for a while, and I don't know much beyond what I knew the first day.
Right. You mentioned the shit rat face, by the way. So Campea is looking to completely kibosh that. What are your thoughts on that? Is that not the most like insignificant thing possible to think about changing for Movie Talk?
John has fun, but sometimes he likes to eliminate the fun on the show. I mean, there are times on the show when people are laughing, being a little loud, and he instantly puts the kibosh, as you say, on those situations. So I'm not surprised that he wants to bring a bit more gravity to the show, but I don't know. It's a fun little gag, and it shouldn't be limited. It shouldn't be something that you have to go out of your way to say, no, we're not doing this anymore. It's a fun little thing to do once in a while.
And it was like when he addressed it in the live video, it seemed like he had thought about that for a long time, Or maybe the first time he ever saw it, he was like, I hate this about movie talk now. And I think it's the smallest thing. I think people like it. I think people think it's funny. Maybe not Ellis. They get frustrated, but that's part of the humor of it. I don't know. I mean, it's not the end of the world that I'm never going to see them do shit reds again, but I also think it's the most insignificant thing to have to change about movie talk. It was totally harmless fun, so...
Let me ask you something. The Wendy cam, that is something that I believe never would have happened if John had stayed as showrunner. And I think they got this idea from Screen Junkies just to kind of have someone watching the chat and kind of chiming in with, you know, a random fact here and there, just telling everybody what's going on social media-wise. But this is something I don't think would have been installed had John been around. So do you think he's going to keep the Wendy cam?
I have no idea, and they didn't even address that at all in the video, did they?
Well, here's where I'm going with this. They mentioned that they want to bring back the 4-person panel, which is old school AMC movie talk.
Yeah.
Reason being is they used to film at Stream TV Studios, and at Stream it was a 4-person table, but there was a separate booth for the host.
Yeah, Mova sits somewhere else, right?
Right, and so she would do her hosting from the little booth, and everybody would be at the table, all 4 of them, and there'd be a 4-person panel. So could the host go in the Wendy cam room, which might be Wendy's office, or maybe they'll set up a separate room for the host to kind of capture that type of feel again?
I would assume
because it's strange to put Ashley at the Wanger table by herself when everybody else is adjacent to her.
I think once they add the 4th panelist, I think that will be a duty of the host, and I think Wendy will be lifted out of the show. That's how I think, or at least that's how I would do it. I think the purpose of the Wendy cam or the checking the YouTube comments, I think it's fine, especially when you do it. I like the fact that they started to do it now, like right before they get to mailbag, because at first they checked in on it before buy or sell, right? So they did it twice. Yeah. But now I think they only do it once, and I like that. But it doesn't need to be Wendy, and it could just be the host. So,
am I overthinking this though? Could they just get a bigger table to fit all 5 people?
I don't know if they could get a bigger table.
See, part of me thinks that they're just going to make use of the space they have, and I don't like the idea of putting the host at a different table. I can see Wendy's office or a similar office being used.
The corner chair where Ashley and Sinead usually sit right before movie talk starts and before the what do you call it, stupid thing? Oh, the sidebar. Right before the sidebar goes up, you can see the Sinead is actually sitting on the edge of the set. So I don't know if you could fit somebody else or another table in there.
Let's see here. Yeah, it's very possible that, because I mean the host, theoretically, Ashley, Sinead could read the comments like what Wendy does. I mean, you could have the host do the same job.
Yeah, definitely.
I mean, it would make more sense for the host to do that instead of having a host and Wendy. I'm not trying to take Wendy out of her job, but I mean, she's got plenty of other things to do. But it just makes sense that the host would be the ones monitoring the chat board. That's all.
Definitely. Or maybe even get Wendy to host one day too. That could always happen. So
I'm open to it.
So, but anyway, let's talk about some other things. He was discussing the fact that Movie Talk is moving to 10 a.m. Doesn't really affect me, really. I mean, I'm fine with that. Does that make a big difference to you?
That works better around my schedule because I go to the gym every day at 11, so I can watch Movie Talk and then go straight to the gym, which is always nice. I never get to watch live. So for me, that is a nice convenience.
I want to work for you, by the way. When I come to the OC, I want to have your work schedule and be able to go to the gym at that time.
He made a point about outside guests. Someone said, "Are you ever thinking about bringing in people that are not part of the YouTube movie space?" And I've always said this would expand their audience, bringing in people that have their own segment of fans, their own faction. And Campea is very insistent on bringing in people that know movies and have their own movie-type programming in some way, shape, or form. And I just think that's misguided because everybody in this space knows about Collider Movie Talk. If you open yourself up to an occasional guest panelist that is on YouTube but has a little bit different programming, it might be cool to get an outside perspective on movies. Everybody likes movies.
I disagree, because even when someone in the movie space comes on, like a Hal Rudnick, for example, again, I talk about this. Hal Rudnick and I think Sam Levine was on. When they were both on Movie Talk, it was shit. And both of those people know a lot about movies, but I don't think they fit what Movie Talk is going for. Like, I really disliked that episode. So I would
not have two outsiders on at once. Just an occasional guest panelist, one person, to see if you can grow your audience through their audience. Because this is an incestuous space. Everybody knows everybody. Everybody's worked with everybody. Everybody knows about this channel already. Open yourself up to a different corner of the web and see what happens.
Maybe for something else. But like, okay, Top 10 Show could do something like this. So Top 10 Show could do Top 10, I don't know. Give me a random YouTube personality that isn't in movies.
Fine Brothers?
Okay. Well, they're kind of it. Well, okay. You could do Top 10 Fine Brothers movies, and the Fine Brothers could do their Top 10 movies, for example. Like that, something like that, I would be on board with. But I don't want random YouTubers coming on Movie Talk if they don't have a whole lot to offer with the movie news. I just don't. So maybe figure something else out to get other YouTubers to help grow Collider, but specifically Movie Talk, no. I'm not on board for that.
Well, we always talk about growing these channels, and when you limit yourself to the same people, you're limiting growth. So it is what it is, but let me address the Top 10 Show real quick before we get back to Campea.
Okay.
I made a simple programming suggestion last week, and I had a couple people jump down my throat when my suggestion to add user-collected top 10s as a collection would simply mean that one infographic would be shown at the end of every episode to compare against the show's top 10. That's all it would be. People acted like I was trying to change the recipe to Coca-Cola Classic. I mean,
every time you talk about people,
point, you learn things. Someone else said, "Yeah, I learned so much," and I'm trying to say you're still going to learn what you're currently learning. What I'm proposing doesn't change the format of the show. You're simply getting one infographic at the end of the episode that has viewer combined collected data to form a viewer top 10 list. That's it. That way we can see what the audience says and what the show says. And based on the 7fave hashtag, which was a crazy success, it's worth gathering that data. But so once again, what am I changing about the format that has people so up in arms?
By the way, this week's movie or top 10 was extremely loosely based on a movie coming out this weekend. Like the movie they said it was for, I've never even heard of. I looked on IMDb, coming out in theaters this week. I didn't even see it. So I don't know what the hell they're talking about with their movie. I mean, it goes along with the fact, like last week, we were hoping that they would kind of branch off and not be so reliant on the movie coming out. But they still kind of were. Like, they made a point to say which movie they were discussing, but I don't even remember the movie. I didn't see that it was coming out, so I don't know what the hell they're talking about.
So you didn't learn a lot, I take it.
No, I did. I mean, actually, I don't even remember what it was. Do you remember what this week's list was?
I didn't watch, but again, the objective of the show is to make a top 10 list. Yes, you might learn something along with it, but the objective is still to rank 10 movies. Why not gather viewer top 10s? Why not?
That's fine. That's fine.
It's one infographic. One.
My point was, I just don't need the fan interaction. Like, I couldn't even submit a bracket to the Schmoedown this week. Like, that's how little involved I was as a fan. But we'll get to that later on. So.
I'll address that too. But someone said, if we let the audience give their top 10s to create a viewer top 10, it's just going to be nothing but generic movies. How do you know that?
That's not true. I think when people participate in the chat for the live show, people are smart. They're smarter than you think, and they bring up movies. Definitely not generic, I guess you should say.
Well,
so
look at the 7fave hashtag. How many people had the same 7 movies for that hashtag?
Right. Well, I mean, it's like, but even when they did their own 7 favorite movies, they were stealing others at the desk. So if anything, they were being generic on the show.
Oh yeah.
I don't think the viewership would be as generic as they were. So I mean, your boy Chad Michael Collins, he just stole everybody's answers for his stuff.
Tricks? I don't got any tricks, man.
Let's get back to Campea. Let's wrap this up real quick. What else did he brought up? Just a random aside, BVS Ultimate Edition commentary next week. I figured you'd have something to say about that because you didn't want them to comment on bad movies. But this is a popular bad movie. So do you have a problem with this? Are you glad that they're coming back?
No problem. I'm just disappointed that it took so long because I thought we had all moved on from this movie. I'll still watch it, don't get me wrong. What I will say, though, the only thing that I don't like about Campea's movie talk hosting is the fact that he has to explain buy or sell every single show with the exact same language. It's automatic.
I don't think buy or sell is like any different than their discussion beforehand. Like when you go to a panelist, they're still discussing their opinion. So it's not really that different of a segment. Like you just like, I don't know. Does that make sense?
The idea or you don't.
And yeah, and they're already saying in the first 2 stories, they do the exact same thing, but then they just say buy or sell the second time. And even when you hear those opening discussions before you get to buy or sell, they still happen to say, if this was in buy or sell, I'd sell it. It's the same thing. It's not any different. So I actually think buy or sell is totally worthless in movie talk. But Campea said that they might be introducing a new segment, so I'd be curious to see what that is. But I think buy or sell is totally pointless. It's the exact same thing, just with the label buy or sell. So
I used to have this long-running Twitter gag with John Schnepp where I would pretend I didn't know what buy or sell was, and I kept asking him to explain to me what does this buy or sell segment mean, because I could tell at some point I could tell that he was annoyed by the explanation to it. And so he and I would go back and forth for, I don't know, a few months. It was it was a funny little thing, but just watch that next time you see him host. And I'll be curious to see if he goes back to that exact same explanation, because it doesn't really need an explanation at this point. Even if you're a new viewer, it's very self-explanatory. Lastly, what do you think he's going to do with the show length? They've been dabbling with that for a while. It's been an hour. It's been 48 minutes of late. It used to be 30 minutes when they were at stream because they were on the clock for the hour and they didn't want to pay more. Plus, they were parked in 15-minute parking or 30-minute parking, whatever it is. And John did not give a definitive answer. So what length do you want, and where do you think they're going to end up ultimately?
I'm fine with the 45-minute show. I sort of like the get in, get out of it. I'd say 45 minutes is fine, and I think they'll probably keep it that way. But then again, the fact that they're pushing it back to 10 a.m., that might give them a little bit of room to breathe, and you might end up seeing a show that's over an hour. So, but how are you going to make it over an hour? I think the only thing that's going to push it that long is just whether you do more Twitter questions. Like they pretty much get through. Yeah, exactly. And they started doing one mailbag question now, right? Didn't they stop doing 2?
Yeah, they cut down to make the length or the runtime shorter.
Right. So, I don't really care. I don't want to feel that they are rushing the show. So if I feel like that Christian doesn't let them, Christian won't be hosting anymore, but if I feel like Christian lets the panelists say like two things and he's like, okay, what's next? Then I'm not gonna like it as much. I don't think Campea does that all the time. So as long as I don't feel like it's being rushed, I'm sort of fine with whatever. But it gets to a point where you're only making the show longer by taking more Twitter questions. So I'm good with 45 minutes to an hour. So
I agree. I mean, in the AMC days, the show was 30 minutes, and so Campea was just so quick, and it was a very rushed show, and that was the best part about the Collider studio now, is that they can go a bit longer. But I like John being back because he's going to tighten up some of the opening segment descriptions. That's the one negative or critique I would offer, is that some of these opening news stories have too much copy, and that's stuff that John would have edited or condensed had he been in charge still. So there are moments where the host is reading, and I kept expecting them to cut to the panelists, but the host would keep going. So that's the one thing that John's going to be able to bring back, which is brevity, unlike my explanation just now.
Sure. I think that if they decide to, well, let me turn this into a question. So if they decide to add more programming, do you think Movie Talk should be the program that gets shortened? Like, is Movie Talk the more, I don't want to say dispensable, but I mean, is that the one where you could cut length, or do you think that it's fine where it is and other shows need to be shortened? Because I think it's noticeably different when it comes to Heroes and Jedi Council. Heroes used to run over an hour and a half, and now they've kept it at an hour. So I've noticed that they're trying to keep it at an hour for all their programming. But is Movie Talk the one that can be sacrificed if they decide to add other programming?
Well, like I said, 30 minutes is too short. It's too rushed. But 48 to 50 minutes, I think, is just right, as long as you use that time efficiently and don't spend it reading descriptions of news stories that don't need that much explanation. So It's how you use it ultimately. Jedi Council does a great job of getting through things and yet still feeling relaxed at the same time. Jedi Council just has a good feel to it. I can't really explain it, but there's a nice vibe to that show.
I feel like Jedi Council gets the most in somehow. Like, they talk about so much stuff that they can't even have a sidebar, because like the sidebar would be so small because there's so many stories and movie news. But for some reason, it's just as long as every other show, and I don't know what it is. And it usually has the biggest panel, right? Don't they usually have like 4 or 5 people?
Yeah.
Depending on the day. So I don't know how they do it, but I wish I got to see more Jedi Council, because usually that's the one that ends up getting axed when I'm trying to watch my Collider content. But yeah, that's a good point.
I can't listen past the movie news because I'm not interested in canon, so I only see the first 30 minutes.
Well, it keeps me. I stay a better fan to Star Wars because of what's to deal with canon, and there are some books that I like to read, and I've checked out a few of the comics, so I do like that portion of the show. Is there anything? I'm ready to move on from Campea though, unless you have something that you just have to get out.
I covered it all, man.
Okay. I think we're ready to go into the Schmoedown, but I wanted to make another point real quick because I can't decide how I feel about the opening intro to Collider TV Talk. So I just want you to tell me if this is too redundant. And I don't know if you've noticed this before, but on TV Talk, Sinead opens with, where we bring you the latest news from the world of television, plus talk about the week that was in TV. Is that not redundant? Is she not saying the same thing there, or is it two different things?
Well, as someone who has a podcast that talks about television and has a very redundant and wordy intro, I think that's actually kind of brief in comparison. But yeah, it is a bit redundant. So
every time I've heard her say it, I'm like, you just said the same thing twice. But if she's saying, we bring you the latest news, so she's talking about, hey, we break news here, but talk about the week that was in TV. So I guess they're discussing stuff that happened like the Olympics. So that's not really news if they're like recapping the Olympics. I don't know. When I hear it said, I feel like it's dumb. But I guess if you break it down, it's a little bit different. It just sounds the same. So I don't know. Work on that, Makuga. You're stressing me out.
Put down the remote. Pick up the pen.
Okay. All right. Do you want to talk about Schmoedown now?
Yeah, let me ask you, what did you think of the tournament video? A couple of weeks ago, I was complaining how some of those ranking videos were a bit hard to follow, as there weren't a lot of infographics and a lot of hypotheticals that were hard to follow. But I like this show. I like the discussion. I like the graphics that we got to see. I really was able to compartmentalize everything that was going on ahead of the tournament. And I wouldn't mind a regular discussion show once league play starts again. I wouldn't mind a discussion show that kind of recaps everything, shows us standings, statistics, etc.
Are you saying that we should break off the Schmoeville podcast and just have a totally separate movie trivia Schmoedown podcast? Is that what you want?
Not a bad idea. Not a bad idea.
It would be awesome if we were in the Collider studio and actually did Schmoeville podcast and the Schmoedown podcast. They're in studio, but you know,
baby steps, sir. Baby steps.
Yeah, we might be a little far away from that, but you know, it'd be really cool. I think it's helpful that we've actually got a bracket now, so there's not a lot of ifs, ands, or buts about like the placement and everything. So I think that just helps. I did like the show. I didn't catch all of it, but I did like the discussion of it. So I'm not opposed to it or anything by any means. I'd be curious to see if they do this weekly, if they're going to put up another one this week, now that we've got a winner from the first round. So, I mean, yeah, it was fine. I liked it.
For a few minutes, I almost convinced myself that they did not know the answers already. So it worked, I think.
Oh, yeah. You didn't feel like they gave away too much on accident?
No, I mean, sometimes, like, you got to tell yourself, just ignore the fact it's pre-taped. They're just telling you what they thought before it was taped. Maybe they're just, maybe they're giving you what they thought before it happened. That's what I had to tell myself, at least. And for the most part, I bought it.
What's funny is that we bring up that point a lot on this podcast, but it's mainly because, like, this is where we would have that type of discussion. Like, of course, we're going to examine more things for this Schmoeville podcast. But all in all, if I didn't do this podcast, I wouldn't care or think anything of the fact that it's pre-taped. Like, I just honestly wouldn't care. I just like to bust chops. But
I keep asking you for a segment called Conspiracy Corner so I can lob out my latest conspiracy of the week.
Is that real? Have you actually asked me to do that before?
Yeah, man. You know I love starting conspiracies on the show.
I guess I really don't listen to you as much as you think. So I don't
Stop saying that.
Don't get upset. I was just joking.
Miri's been off camera 4 times out of the last 5 weeks. What's going on, guys?
I wear a size 11.
Has stolen her away?
I wear a size 11 shoe. Let's talk about the bracket, because I mentioned it before. I didn't fill out the bracket. I guess I'm terrible at interacting. But the thing about me and brackets is I'm from Kentucky, okay? I'm a UK fan. So when I fill out a bracket, I don't have to think about it. I just put UK winning the championship, and then I just work backwards from that. So I'm very bad at doing brackets in general. So I don't know if that plays into this here. That's actually kind of how I did this bracket too. I don't know if anybody else out there does it that way, but I just pick the winner and kind of work backwards. I wrote it down, but no, I did not submit a bracket. Did you submit a bracket?
Do you wear a white suit when you're at home watching basketball?
A white suit? Like a 3-piece suit?
Do you have an all white Rick Pitino suit that you wear around Kentucky?
No. I mean, why would a UK fan wear a Rick Pitino suit at this point? I mean,
I'm thinking, why am I thinking of Louisville for some reason?
Yeah, I'm not a Louisville fan. I'm with Coach Cal over here.
Of course, but obviously Pitino used to be the coach at UK, but for some reason I kept thinking current Pitino.
We don't talk about Pitino anymore. we're in Cal we trust, okay? Yeah, we're done with Pitino. My entire family cried when Pitino left UK. Just a fun fact.
When I think of Kentucky, instantly I think of Rick Pitino. No offense.
That's fine. He still coaches in this state. And there are some people with that mentality, like, I don't care who's in as long as Kentucky basketball is represented. And I'm like, no, you'd be rooting for your rivals. You wouldn't do that. So anyway, that's not what we're talking about. Did you fill out a bracket?
My white suit bit failed extremely hard, but my bracket, I got home from the gym, I had my lunch, and I realized, oh no, I forgot to fill out my brackets. So I DM Kid Christian. It's around 1 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, 1 hour past the deadline. I say, hey, Kid Christian, can you make an exception since I've got some major clout over there now, being the co-host of the Schmoeville podcast? And he instantly says, oh, absolutely. You're Kid Brian Davids, no problem.
Is that what he actually said, or are you making that up?
Yeah, totally. It's word for word. So I sent over my bracket. It's accepted. It's in the system, even though it was an hour late.
I wonder how many people you're going to piss off.
I know, right? Hey, it was still an hour before the show aired, so
you always talk about how many people DM you with their problems with you, even though I haven't seen any of that. But
no one's DM me regarding problems with me. They DM me with their issues regarding like the show. They'll ask me, is Christian really married? Is Christian secretly involved with Miri? Like, I get all of the...
Yeah, I was doing that in the live chat last night. We'll talk about that. I get
all the conspiracy theorists trying to get information out of me.
Yeah. Yeah, I did a little... I did some clearing of the air in the live chat last night during the show. What are we talking about brackets? So, do you want to go over who we have on our brackets?
Yeah. You want to start with yours?
Yeah, so I had Reilly beating Dewberry, and yes, I promised that I filled that out before the match happened. I have Roca beating Christian. I think that's next week. I'm not positive. But we actually thought that match was happening tonight, and that was something that Christian fact-checked that we were wrong about when we talked about it with RB3. I have Roca beating Harloff. I've got Clark beating Makuga. And I've got Sam Levine beating Ellis. So my final four are Reilly, Wolf, Roca, and Levine. What are yours?
Well, keep in mind, to win brackets, my typical approach is to go against the grain. I usually pick the opposite of what most people are going to pick. So as a result, I picked Dewberry, which obviously didn't work out.
Idiot.
I'm going for the bracket win, not for whatever. I know that everybody else is going to pick Reilly. So my chance to win this bracket is to go against the grain. And I would not have been surprised had Dewberry actually beat him.
I'm not sure
how if
that's how it works, but
having played March Madness all these years, it's a strategy that has worked for me as I've won 3 brackets the last 15 years. So for March Madness, that's actually pretty good. But
we'll see about that this coming year.
Kid Christian, I picked over Roca.
See, last week we talked about that, and I picked Christian last week. But for some reason in the last week, I just changed. For some reason, I just feel like Roca's out for blood. He is extremely intelligent. I don't know. I feel like Roca just has less brain farts, and I know people are instantly jumping up saying, Bespin! But I mean, that was... You know, it's funny, I give Roca shit for not knowing Bespin, but I wonder how people actually give him shit without, like, being able to answer that same question. You know what I mean?
Well, Reilly had an easier question today regarding Bail Organa's debut.
We'll talk about that. All
right, fine.
But anyway, I just, over the past week, I just decided, hey, I'm actually going to go with Roca. So, but you picked Christian. So you're saying that Roca is the favorite because you're going against the grain, correct?
I picked Kid Christian. I'm going against the grain.
Okay.
I picked Wildman over Wolf. I picked Levine over Baby Carrots.
Okay, so we agree on one of those things, and it's Sam Levine versus Ellis. Interesting.
That's right. Round 2.
Okay. I've got Reilly beating Roca, and I've got Clark beating Sam Levine yet again.
Well, I had Dewberry over Kid Christian. Kid Christian, I'm sorry.
You thought obviously, Dewberry was going in? Oh my God.
My bracket is busted already. Well, not quite. But I picked Levine over Wildman. So
I mean, I agree that Levine would beat Makuga, but since I didn't even have Makuga beating Wolf, then I can't get on board with that. So you have Levine versus Dewberry
in the final with Levine beating Dewberry in the final. God.
So who do you have winning the whole thing? Do you have Dan Levine or Dewberry?
I had Levine beating Dewberry in the final.
And then Dan versus Levine.
Oh crap! Did I not fill out the championship part? Well, obviously, no. The winner of this tournament goes on to face Dan later.
That's fine. I'm just wondering who you think would win. The winner of the tournament versus Dan Merle. Who do you got?
Merle. I can't pick against Merle anymore.
Yeah,
someone hassled us on Twitter. Let's talk about that. Someone came at us saying, "Why do you guys have disdain for Dan Merle?" Do you think we have disdain for Dan Merle?
No, I think it took me a long time to catch on to how good he was, and also didn't think anything of that guy tweeting at us. I thought he was totally fine. I didn't take it the wrong way in any means. I think you got a little more upset than I did.
Again, I want to start a segment called Conspiracy Corner, where we talk about things like conspiracies of having disdain for Dan Merle.
Yeah, it took me a while, and to that kid's credit, it did take me a while to get on board with Dan Merle. Not as a player. I've always liked Dan, but as a player, I don't know. I've sort of taken him for granted, I guess. But I don't know.
He's got no recall issues either. I mean, he's very snappy. He's got a deep well of information. But some of these guys, they blank. They freeze. Or just they can't remember in time.
Right.
Not him.
I kind of thought this was not as fun because I have Dan keeping the belt. So it was like it didn't even really matter who I picked to win the ultimate tournament just because I think Dan's going to keep the belt. So,
well, who do you have winning this tournament directly?
I have Reilly winning it again.
Okay.
So. But I think if Reilly goes up against Dan, I think Dan can keep it.
Yeah.
So, but anyway, that's that. I'm really excited, dude, and I'm also really excited for. I hate that the team title match isn't until next fall, because I was really looking forward to that. But I mean, this is a lot of fun. The whole bracket and stuff. Did they do the bracket stuff with the last Ultimate tournament?
They've done brackets before.
Okay, so they've done it before. Okay. Yeah, pretty cool. And the last tournament that they did, was that 16 weeks instead of 8 weeks?
It was 37 weeks.
What?
I don't know, man. Come on.
What the hell's your problem?
That's too specific.
No, it isn't. I think Christian said it was 16 weeks. But anyway, I'm very excited, and I'm glad we've got this bracket. It's been a lot of fun.
Honestly, the last tournament may have been 37 weeks because there were so many delays in between matches.
Okay.
I mean, there were the championship match was not played until the Collider merger.
Yeah, you got a point. So
that 37 week comment that I meant as a sarcastic quip actually is true.
If you have to explain when you're making jokes, then you've got a problem.
Well, I meant to make a joke at first, but it's actually the truth. That's why I have to then explain it's the truth.
That's fair. Let's talk about this match specifically, Reilly versus Dewberry. So you mentioned how I got really damn upset when Reilly had to go multiple choice on the Bail Organa, because for one, he's supposed to be a Star Wars guy, and it can only be 3 movies. Right. And I feel like the answer is very obvious, especially if I know it, then he should definitely know it. And the fact that he had to go multiple choice is ridiculous, because it can only be 3 movies.
Can there be a more unnecessary multiple choice request than that one?
And he looked away at the audience, and I'm sure someone like Roca in the audience was looking at him like, what the hell is the matter with you? Because I think that's worse than Bespin. Like, he didn't blow didn't blow the match like Roca did in the final question. Like, Roca getting Star Wars at the end, that should have been like a win. So it's a little bit different, but I think looking at that, Reilly going multiple choice for that question is worse than Roca missing out on Bespin. because me, who's a casual Star Wars fan, I knew Reilly's answer before I knew Roka's answer. So
right.
I mean, so I guess you got a little upset at that too.
I couldn't believe it. I mean, Jimmy Smits is a famous actor too, so he stands out in a film.
Yeah.
Because it's Jimmy Smits. So that was shocking, but it was even more shocking that he actually requested multiple choice.
Yeah. So ridiculous.
I was hoping that would cost him. I wasn't hoping, but I kept thinking that's going to cost him the win right there.
Yeah.
That's going to come back to haunt him.
Yeah. And the thing about that is someone tweeted at me, and I can't remember who it was. They tweeted at me saying that we would talk about this moment at the wheel. And honestly, because that guy said that, I thought Dewberry won. Like, I thought he was indirectly telling me that Reilly got screwed at the wheel. Since he was obviously the favorite going into the match. But right after that, Elliot got lucky with those two back-to-back questions with the 90s category. So, and then it was 11-8 at the end of the round. So, right. I mean, Elliot, even though we discount Elliot Dewberry just because we don't care, right? We don't know who he is. The last time I watched a Machinima video, it was like a random Call of Duty 4 video, which was like 2008. So I didn't even know Machinima was still a thing.
I've never watched it, but I think the guy can make a splash in this league at some point. He got some impossible questions right. He just got killed in round 3 for questions that he should have known, such as Meg Ryan and Tom Hanks' first film together, as well as a Fast Times question. That is something that he should know, especially his age.
Well, I think an easy question that he got was in the first round when they asked which movie was never number 1 and they had a multiple choice. They named like Titanic and 2 other movies that were known for being box office champions, and then you have Big Fat Greek Wedding in there. Like, I thought that was an extremely easy question, and I can't believe he missed that.
In round 3, if he got the Joe versus Volcano and Fast Times questions correct, he would have been up 16 to Reilly's 14 with Reilly's 5-pointer on deck. So he could have won this matchup. He very easily could have won this matchup, assuming that Reilly had a tough 5-point question.
One thing that probably made me as mad as Reilly going multiple choice is the fact that in round 3, Elliot's 5-point question was, which MCU movie comes after Iron Man? That is a bullshit question. I'm not gonna lie.
It's like a month later.
That, and because I think it's an extremely easy question, especially for showing up as the 5-pointer in the 3rd round. I thought that was absolute bullshit, and I was gonna get really, really pissed if Elliot won because of that. Like, I really hated for the first time in the Schmoedown. I really hated that was the round 3 5-pointer question.
I think Dewberry's gonna make a splash at some point. I just said it, but. The guy impressed. He got a couple impossible questions right. I mean, like Kristen Scott Thomas or something to that effect. But obviously, Reilly was the heavy favorite, and that played out accordingly. But did you like the match overall? What'd you think?
I did like the match. I mean, it was still close, right? I mean, it was 14-3. So
most of these matches have been pretty good. I mean,
I discounted Dewberry at the start, so he surprised me. He surprised me for sure, and I'm very happy with the match. I thought it was a good beginning to the tournament for sure. So I would like to see harder questions as the 5-pointer questions, though.
It was a nice pick-me-up from last week's Heartbreaker.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, is that all you got on that? Are we ready to get to Harloff podcast?
Yeah, so do you still believe that Tom Dagnino was not telling the truth on this episode?
So I started listening to the podcast. I was on my way up to go see Hell or High Water. I picked that podcast. First of all, I'm glad Harloff podcast is back. I think it's fantastic. The fact that the episode is titled Finstock, not Tom Dagnino, okay? So it was a little confusing that the episode is called Finstock, but Christian clarifies that this is Tom Dagnino. Right. So I didn't know really what to believe. And of course, it's sort of like a gray area now. Like, he does the Smeagol Gollum, he goes back and forth, and you never know which one you're actually getting. So, and that's nothing new to Finstock, right? We all know that. I think a lot of people thought going into that episode that it was going to be fabricated. And I listened to the first like 10 or 15 minutes, and he is expressing some really... He was very dark. He was very real. And the way he was speaking, he was sort of all over the place. And it really didn't seem that far off base from what Finstock actually talks about. And I know that's kind of weird to talk. He's not dark all the time, but just his manner of speaking, the cadence, it sounded like Finstock. So I messaged Christian. I was actually analyzing Christian's reactions to what he was saying, more so than what he was actually saying, to see if I could figure out if this was actually real or not. And I messaged Christian. I said, look, how much of this, what percentage of your podcast with him is fabricated? He said none of it. And I said, okay, well, I'm not going to put it past Christian to lie to me for production's sake. Like, he could lie to me, and then I could come on here on Schmoeville podcast and just talk about how it was just unreal and I totally thought it was fake. But he said, no, if I wasn't telling the truth, or if I didn't want to answer your question, I just wouldn't respond. But I'm telling you that it was 100% real. And I listened to the rest of it, and it was a little all over the place. Like, it just felt like it could have possibly been made up. The fact that he was just... It sounded like he was pulling shit out of his ass. But as of right now, I now totally agree, and I think it's the truth, that he was being absolutely real. And I think... Now that I think it's totally real, I think it took insane amount of courage to talk about the things he talked about on the Harloff podcast. I think a lot of people are surprised or are going to be surprised when they listen to this podcast. And if you have not listened to it yet, please do, because it's extremely insightful and it will change how you look at Tom Dagnino for the rest of your life when watching Schmoes. And I'm still a little shocked that he had the background that he had, and he came out the way he did. And as little as we know about him, still, he definitely has his head screwed on tight. So I can't believe he's come out with that this way with his background. And that's pretty much all I have to say. I thought it was a tremendous episode, and I'm definitely glad that I listened to it, for sure.
I've got Mr. Robot on the mind a lot lately, obviously because it's airing. And I kept getting these parallels to Mr. Robot through Tom Dagnino's life. He's got this complicated upbringing with his family, his father, his brother, his mother, a lot of heavy stuff. And eventually he wants to get out of the life that he's in. He doesn't want to be with his friends every Friday talking about the same things. He decides to make a better life for himself, comes out to LA. He says he sells some shows. He says he befriends some people that are higher up than him, and then he would sell things to their friends. I still don't know what he actually does. They were very cagey about that still. Preserve the mystery like Mr. Robot likes to do. But it was fascinating to hear the origin of the mask. And I knew bits and pieces of that before, but hearing how he bought it from a store in Brooklyn called Scandinavian Grace just reminded me of how the origin of the F Society mask popped up recently. And
sure, yeah, okay.
I kept getting so many reminders to that, especially because both characters are from New York. So I painted it through this lens of Mr. Robot. I saw Tom's life through Mr. Robot's lens for some reason. I know this sounds crazy, but...
I mean, I could see it. They're both broken. They're sort of broken individuals. Christian wouldn't know anything about it because he doesn't give a shit about TV. But, yeah,
and
I mean...
Finstock is his Mr. Robot, though.
Maybe.
It is. It's his alt ego.
Yeah, for sure. I get what you're saying, and I don't think it's that weird at all because I'm a huge Mr. Robot fan, too.
The letter opener that kid Christian mentioned fascinated me. He mentioned his dad brought him back a letter opener from Europe. So I just had this big mental image of Christian, a young Christian with this giant letter opener in his hand. And he's seeing the mask for the first time while holding this letter opener. That is so Mr. Robot.
That's hilarious.
I don't know, man.
I did not expect you to go on a Mr. Robot tangent.
Me either. It's Friday.
But I mean, I just, do you agree? I mean, it took an insane amount of courage to do that podcast. And the fact that, like you said, the fact that he wanted something else for himself, the fact that he had the ability to just get up and go to LA. My background, I have not had it hard at all growing up, and I'm scared to death to go to LA. Like, if I had a reason to go to LA, I would, but the unknown, just going and just getting a job while I'm out there or whatever, that freaks me out. And so I can't imagine what that must have been like for him to experience. So I think it's extremely inspiring, and again, I urge everyone, if you have not listened to the Harloff podcast yet, please do it. It's crazy. It's pretty nuts. So
between the Schmoes Know Show, TV Talk, Schmoedown, and the Harloff podcast, those are my 4 favorite programs on this entire network. Those 4. Schmoes Know Show, Schmoedown, Harloff podcast, TV Talk.
I thought Harloff podcast was number 1 this week in programming, period. I thought it was the best thing that came out this week.
Yeah, it might be. I mean, you're getting information about these people that completely change your view on them. And anyone who's ever misunderstood Finstock or been offended by something that he said, listen to this podcast. That's all I can say.
Absolutely. Let's segue into this week's history lesson. So we're going to start doing this history lesson. We sort of did it at the beginning of the Schmoeville podcast, but I just don't have the time to watch an extra live show every week. So basically, I'm going to bring up something, or Brian's going to bring up something that happened in the history of the Schmoes Know Show, and he's basically going to teach me about it. And I actually was able to do a little bit of research this week, but we're not going to rely on that. But you know, obviously with this Finstock stuff, I went back to episode 74, which was the debut of Finstock, and they reference this episode in the Harloff podcast. So what do you remember about this episode before I sort of talk about it?
Well, Finstock was introduced basically as Christian's idea. Christian didn't really tell anybody what was going on. There was just this guy with this Scandinavian beard mask hanging around the Toad Hop studio. And everybody was kind of confused what was going on. Christian played it pretty close to the vest from what he went on to explain. Eventually, he sat him down, started talking to him, and eventually had him take off the mask, revealing that it was Tom Dagnino. He introduced him as this writer/actor at the time. And Tom still had the beard then, still looks like he does now. And this guest, I don't know if you'd call her a co-host, but I guess she would appear semi-often, Megan Finley. She was there.
Tom I was going to say, I keep wanting to say Megan Kelly, and I know that's the wrong person.
So Finstock does his thing, but the Finstock thing was kind of the mask was taken off pretty quick, and he just talked as Tom for the most part. And right away, he's causing a bit of a ruckus.
Yeah.
He explains about the time that he met Alan Rickman, and he walked up to him, and he explains how Alan Rickman was kind of a dick. And Rickman apparently said, let me guess, Die Hard, right? And Finstock Tom apparently reacted a bit rudely to Mr. Rickman.
He said he called him a queen.
Called him a queen and said, no, the English patient, you queen, or something to that effect. But I think Megan was offended by the queen comment because he said some other harsh language as well. But she was kind of offended.
He also said just sort of a random comment about some woman. He said that he said something to a woman and he referred to her as a bitch. So that was the time when I definitely saw Megan get irritated with Finstock.
Right. So this was later described as the worst interview ever by the Schmoes Know cast on this week's live show. I don't think it's the worst interview ever, but if you're in that room for the first time with this guy, I might understand why they might say that. But as far as interviews, there have been some awful interviews. Not many, but a few. This was just the most bizarre, I think.
So what I found... Oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, finish your thought.
I just thought what was so fascinating to me is that I appreciated what Finstock was doing because I know Finstock. I was fascinated by the fact that Christian didn't really tell anyone what was happening.
Yeah.
Like, the fact that I genuinely see Ellis get pissed, and the fact that Knapsack is irritated and Megan is pissed. I cannot believe Christian didn't inform them of that. That's what I found fascinating. And yeah, Ellis got really, really damn pissed. I think he even like called Finstock an idiot and was like dead serious at one point. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I thought that was. I mean, it added. I thought it was funny that he did that. But now, like when stuff like that happens, when things are produced, everyone is sort of in the loop, right? So it was interesting that Christian kept that to himself.
But they kind of kept this going though, creating these awkward moments between Finstock and whatever woman is on the show. They've done that with Alicia. They've done that most famously with Tiffany. He is a great source of entertainment when it comes to creeping out the women on the show.
Finstock asked one of the callers if he was affected by Hurricane Sandy. And everyone was like, oh my God, why did you ask that? He's like, Finstock just asked the guy. In the middle of Christian talk to him, Finstock was like, so are you inland or did you get screwed by Hurricane Sandy? And I think this was like going on during the show. I couldn't believe he did that. Megan's face was priceless. And also, things that he brought up in this show were sprinkled in the Harloff podcast, like the Ron DeLuca or Ron DeLucia guy that he spoke about in the podcast. For one, he called him, I think, I can't remember which one it was, but on one of the shows, he called him Ron DeLuca, and on another, he called him Ron DeLucia. So I found it interesting that if this is a real person, he mispronounced the name on one of the episodes. But he also talked about how Ron slept with 80 girls in 80 days. So he had a lot of the same anecdotes. So it makes me wonder how many things that Finstock has said that are actually true, but we just laugh at thinking he's blowing smoke, you know?
What's his claim that he makes? He's the wide bar pull-up champion. He referenced that on the podcast, but that's part of his Twitter bio as well.
Right.
That's how he got in shape when he first came out to LA.
I'd be curious. I might ask Christian how he would feel about this, but I might start taking everything Finstock says as the truth from here on out. Like, everything he says, I'm just going to instantly believe. For some reason, I buy everything he says now. So,
this Finstock thing, though, the whole idea, the conception of it,
right?
Where do you think that comes from as far as Christian is concerned? Where do you think he picked up this sort of entertainment prowess?
Well, didn't Christian speak that the discovery of the mask happened years before the debut? So it had to be just like a random thought that he had one day.
I mean, just the idea for Christian to introduce a character in this fashion, where do you think he picked up on ideas like this and hone this skill?
Well, it's because of the WWE, right?
Exactly. So this is Christian using that part of his brain and that experience to create similar characters, personalities for his show, his movie show.
Just like he wants us to be Baba Booey, right?
Exactly. He wants us to be John Hine and Gary Baba Booey Delabate. So, interesting stuff. And then, of course, on the episode, he referenced Malone's stock. He referenced Alicia's mask.
Tell me about that. I haven't seen or heard about this being referenced in all this time. So what is that exactly?
Alicia, like I said, they like to create these awkward moments between the women on the show and Finstock. It's just easy entertainment. It's an easy laugh. When Alicia was on the show a lot in 2014, eventually she got her own mask and she wore it around, and that's why Finstock referenced how nice his mask is in comparison. Other people make beard masks, but it's not one from Scandinavia. It's not one that's $175.
Right.
So I tried to find the episode that she wore it. I searched through probably 70 shows and I couldn't find it, but I do have this image in my head of Alicia wearing her own mask to kind of turn the tables on Finstock. So next week's history lesson will be a bit more prepared than this one, but that certainly did happen. It was a nice change of pace. And there was a while there, for a while though, that he retired Finstock. I think sometime toward the end of 2014, they did a show called The Death of Finstock.
Yeah, I think I've heard of that one.
He stopped wearing the mask for a while. And that obviously led to the return. And that, again, that's all Christian's WWF experience. Retiring a character, retiring a bit, and then bringing it back better than ever. That is a WWF staple.
WWE, we don't want to get sued. WWE. I kind of want more of that. Like, the last time we really had a produced moment before the Finstock coming out for calling out Mance or whatever last week. Before that, I don't think we had anything super produced since the decision. Am I remembering that right? So, and that was several weeks went by between those two. So,
for the record, I only said WWF because I think Christian, when he worked there, it was
I know.
WWF. So
I was just giving you a hard time.
But yeah, we haven't had one of those super. I guess all the production has gone towards the ultimate Schmoedown.
Right.
So
for those of you who don't know, did I even bring this up? Did I even explain why we're doing history lesson? I explained what we're doing, but basically, I'll just say that the first that I've seen of the live show, like in prime time, is Phase 6. So we're gonna go back, and Brian's gonna teach me stuff from the past. That way, I know what the hell I'm talking about on this episode. But anyway,
it's been so long since I've seen some of these episodes, but it gives me a great reason to go back and revisit the stuff that I enjoyed so many years ago. I'm actually revisiting Phase 1 and Phase 2 as we speak, so it's really cool to hear the origins of Ken, to hear his first appearance. And I mean, I've dabbled in that stuff before, but now I have all the reason in the world to soak it up because of this show.
Well, at the beginning of this podcast, I was listening. I binged a lot of the Toad Hop episodes via podcast, and I thought those were a lot of fun to see. When I liked hearing like people like JTE call in as fans. I thought that was pretty funny.
Yeah.
I liked how Go ahead.
Ken made a great point in the live show this week. He said Toad Hop was his favorite. Phase 3 was his favorite because given his experience in radio, it was basically a radio show with cameras.
That's true, yeah.
And when you watch it, it has a very different feel from today's Schmoes Know Show. It is like a radio show. It had a different energy to it. It was a lot louder. Christian was really amped up in those days, but I really think the callers added something unique to that era of the show. And so I wasn't surprised that someone brought up bringing phone calls back.
It was Christian when someone asked during the Q&A what they might change about the live show. He said that they are going to look into doing phone calls and Skype calls again. So
yeah,
he also wants to bring back the couch too. He loves that couch apparently. So
again, it's the Stern thing. It adds that Stern vibe, and it's just. I'm sure it's weird for them to have everybody at kind of adjacent sets currently.
Right.
They can see each other on camera, but the couch adds so much, definitely.
Sure. Okay, well that was it for the history lesson. Hopefully people don't get furious that they have to listen to me being taught things from the past, but I just think that's a good refresher too. I like seeing the moments when Copster inserts those clips into his breaks. I just think it's pretty fun. So
honestly, this week of the Schmoes Know Show was a history lesson for a lot of people.
Sure, it definitely was. But unfortunately, and if you just want to go right into the live show, unfortunately, I'd heard a lot of this. We'll get to that in a second. I just want to say, even before they brought it up, they brought it up early on. We're talking about the live show now, the Q&A episode. That set looks fantastic. And I don't know. I remember asking Christian when he was on. I asked him, I was like, so what exactly is Gentle Giant going to be doing exactly? I needed them to explain it. I didn't know if they were like fabricating a new set or if he just meant the setting up collectibles and stuff. It looks so good now. And it just looks full and yeah, I love it. Did you notice that right away?
I think it looks fantastic. I saw some people complaining, oh, it's too cluttered, things are too busy, but I think it's great. I really do. The Brett
people
photo.
In the live chat, were you watching it live?
I don't watch the live chat. I think I saw the YouTube comments. I stay out of the live chat just because so many things have been spoiled out of nowhere through those chats for me.
Like movies, you mean?
Yeah, movies. I mean, someone will just bring up something random.
Yeah.
And I'm not really a spoiler phobe, but for whatever reason, I avoid the live chat. But yeah, I have no issues with it. It looks great. Brett's photo, though, oh my God. Every time, it's
awesome.
I can't stop staring at it during the show.
I'm sure you loved Miri being there that whole time. That must have been a real treat for you.
Miri was back on the show for the second time in 6 weeks.
Yeah.
I love her presence, but man, I always miss SPR when she's not in the house. She adds such an energy to the show. Last night felt so quiet without her. And add to that, it felt even quieter because the suspended Josh McCouga was still on leave.
And don't you just want Sasha for an episode like this? You know what I mean? I think she adds a lot because she's so honest. Miri is kind of scared to answer questions. Some people get scared, but not Sasha. So Sasha is someone that you just want for Q&A. So it was really unfortunate that she was there. But,
she's money in Q&A. She's so honest when it comes to that stuff. But if you had to describe the people with the two people with the most energy on the show, Sasha and McCouga, right? That's your answer, right?
Probably. I think Ellis is always elevated. Ellis gets pissed off. He's always loud. But Ellis always has an energy to him as well. So.
Well, he doesn't get riled. He doesn't lose his cool all that often. He has recently a couple times, but that's rare. McCouga, when he gets going, he's yelling, he's shouting. That's the reason he's not on the show right now. So, when Sasha and McCouga are not on the show, there is a massive amount of energy missing. But Sasha might be my favorite. So,
You might need to throw RB3 in there too. His energy level, his laugh is only getting louder. So
there was a moment when Brett was talking about his 12-year marriage or 12-year anniversary coming up. RB3 let out a laugh that was priceless. You could hear it loud and clear.
I love him.
And since we just had him on the show last week, we knew it right away. And I actually pitched to you, what if we had RB3 record his laugh in a booth, and we use it as a sound drop whenever there's a joke or something. He's our canned laughter. He's our sitcom audience.
Exactly. He's our studio audience.
That's going next to the conspiracy corner idea on the list.
I'm not saying that the episode was bad, but I'm just a little bit disappointed, only because I felt like I knew a lot of the questions. Obviously, we're not going to talk about every single movie opinion that they have, so that cuts out a lot of last night's show. But, some of the questions were good. I ended up knowing a lot of them, though, a lot of the answers. So, how did you feel about last night's episode?
I echo the same opinion because I've been watching them for so long. I've heard them answer a lot of these the same way. And I get it. It happens, but I'm
especially
sure if I was
new listeners. There are plenty of new listeners that learned all of those facts and heard all those answers for the very first time last night. So I totally get it.
It's catching people up to speed. It's a history lesson for the new phase, the new people that have discovered the show. That's fine, no problem. Certainly, we learned some things about Brett that we didn't know because Brett's new to the show too. But
yeah.
Christian singing the Jedi intro song. I never get tired of that. Talking about his least favorite Star Wars moments. The question was Empire, but for some reason that gets me every time. Daniela Marie, that might be her name, it might not be, but I think she had the best question though. What fictional event or real event would you want to be able to go watch?
Yeah, that was good.
I think that was my favorite question. But there were various moments throughout the episode, various lines. Why did you start reviewing movies on YouTube? Christian's answer, desperation. That was great. Someone took a knock at Reilly's age. That was great. Brett bragging about his Tim Gunn impression. It was his wheelhouse impression. That was great. Ken was money in this episode, opening up about his hair, his virginity, his radio history. Ken has been money of late.
Of late? You mean like this week and last week? Because we were just complaining about Ken not too long ago.
That's what I'm saying. Certain episodes in the last 6 weeks, he's been kind of withdrawn. He's not interested. But lately, he's really poured it on. And I like how the group refused to do a movie pitch. I mean, that was kind of BS. That was not a question. Someone asked them to come up with a movie pitch in 3 sentences or less.
Yeah, that wasn't a good question. I thought they wasted too much time.
It's not a question. It's homework.
I know. I didn't care for that either, and I don't know. I'm surprised that Christian just didn't move on from that. But
I don't like the top comments formula. I don't like the top comments formula just because if you go down that list, there were some great questions that did not have a lot of
Yeah, but if a question is being upvoted, that means it's something that a lot of people want to know. So, last night for me, I don't really know if it was effective, but if a lot of questions are being upvoted, then that means it's something that a lot of people want to know and probably don't know already. So I understand why they went into it that way. Maybe the result wasn't that great, but I understand that approach for sure.
It's a history lesson. This wasn't an episode meant for someone like myself.
Okay. Well, I mean, I've known their previous history, but I don't know if I knew their first job. So I'm not going to be as... There were things that I had learned for the first time like that, but there were others. So I feel a little bit better about the episode than you do, apparently. And I thought
here's my point: relying on YouTube comments, the like algorithm, to determine which is the best comment. That's not foolproof. Like you have to do a bit of editorial work to figure out which ones are best. That's a starting point.
Again, I just think that speaks to the result, but I think I totally understand why they approached it that way. But what I don't get is that Miri said she was running out of YouTube comments when I feel like she only asked like 20, and I'm sure that there were plenty others. So I do question why Miri ran out of YouTube questions if you saw so many good ones.
Well, I think they were just pulling from a list that RB3 cultivated, and then of those top comments, they were running out of top comments. They didn't have the ones that were not top comments. They just had the very best ones. But there was a great line from Brett, 3 Fs, no marry, no kill. That was a creative spin on that. Also, something personal for me, Mark Ellis apparently bites his nails. I like that little anecdote from Christian. And the reason I bring that up is because it reminds me of my best friend, Ben, who is probably Ellis's doppelganger. He reminds me so much of Ellis, looks like him, similar mannerisms. He and I have a friendship kind of like Mark and Christian. Everybody has a friendship like Mark and Christian do for the most part, but the fact that Ellis bites his nails, that fascinated me because it added to what I already thought of Mark and how much he reminded me of my best friend. So, little personal story for me.
Just so people who were listening to the Q&A last night and learning more than what Brian did, I was actually talking to someone in the live chat 'cause people were asking what Whispergate was. So I had to explain, and I love Whispergate. I was obsessed with that topic earlier this summer on here. Yeah, I was explaining what Whispergate was to somebody, so I just thought that was interesting. And I thank you to everyone who was talking to me in the live chat. I thought that was really cool, by the way. But yeah, I mean, it's easy to forget that not a lot of people know some of this stuff. So I don't know. There's just not a whole lot to say about it for me. But I mean, it was a quality episode, and did you make a list of favorite moments? You kind of rattled some of them off. Was that your list?
I've already listed all of them.
Okay. Well, I love celebrity impressions, so the John Lovitz and Gary Busey tangent was fantastic.
Yeah.
I don't know if this is the first time I've heard that they say that Peter Dinklage is Finstock's doppelganger. I thought that was hilarious. One of the hardest laughs. What I didn't like is when they were casting each other's movies, they got like Dolph Lundgren to play JTE and Jean-Claude Van Damme to play Mark Ellis. I was like, why? Like, it's a lot funnier. I mean, I guess the easy answer for Ellis is Topher Grace or whatever, but I felt like you could have been a little bit more funny and actually made sense. But
well, JTE, just because of the way he says Lundgren, I think that's why they assigned him to JTE, just so he would say Lundgren the wrong way.
Yeah.
He said, what does he say, Lundgren or something?
Yeah, it's something different every time, I feel like. A cop-out answer for funniest moment is the news, but I thought the news was great this week. Reilly's horrendous impression of Christian. Oh my God. He was just yelling. And you could do better than that. Like, there are Christian has like a lot of tics that people need to pick up on. Not tricks. Don't go off on a Chad Michael Collins tangent. But
Kid Christian, he doesn't have any tricks.
Christian has tics that you can pick up on just by watching his movie reviews. Like, he fiddles with his mouth a lot. He like chews on the inside of his gum or in his mouth or something, and he's always chewing on something, it looks like. And the way
is Campea gonna...
Have you noticed that Christian holds his elbows really close to himself when he's reviewing the movies? Like, his elbows are like cutting into his abdomen, and he's like waving his hands around explaining the movie. Like, that kind of stuff. I
didn't notice that, but now every time I see him, I'm gonna notice that. So thank you very much, Snelling.
So there's things like that you could pick up on with Christian. Yeah, I don't know. He's not just some guy that yells. So anyway,
quick question: do you think Campea is gonna put a stop to Christian's fart noises?
I don't know. Maybe. Probably. I mean, if Campea is gonna get rid of shit rats, he's getting rid of the farting. So
yeah, probably.
And then my fifth favorite moment was the biggest laugh was probably Brett cutting in and saying that he enjoys his girl's personality. I thought that was a great line. So
Brett's hilarious, man.
Yeah,
we gotta get him on the show. Let's get him on the show.
Yeah, let's get Brett on Schmoeville. That's a good idea. Let's do it. I've talked to like a million people over there about coming on the show, including Cobster, but. And JTE. We'll get JTE on when I'm free one weekend. But yeah, I agree. Brett needs to be on deck for sure. And the last thing I want to mention is that it was funny that we were talking about Whispergate in the live chat because people erupted when Harloff and Miri both said they lost their virginity at 15. Because everyone was just like, oh, they did it together. So I thought that was a very interesting coincidence at that. So... yeah, the fuck, marry, kill game. The fuck, marry, kill game was really funny too. All their answers were pretty good. So, Ken said that he would marry Miri and then flip a coin with everybody else. So that was good.
I still think Brett had the best answer. 3 Fs, no marry, no kill.
Oh yeah, that's the best answer for sure, without a doubt.
Should we do our own F, marry, kill for the same options?
Okay. So what were the options? It was Natasha or Sinead, Miri, and Ashley.
I mean, they had a few different options. I mean,
is that what you want to do?
Why not?
Sinead, Miri, or Ashley. Okay, so I'm going to say. I'm gonna say. I would marry Miri. I will F Sinead, and I will kill Mova. Because she does those annoying voices, like the little nasally baby voice and the "Happy Tuesday, guys."
That drives me up the wall. It drives me up the wall.
Who do you got?
I echo everything you just said. Exactly. Verbatim.
Oh, that's great.
Swap in Sasha for Ashley.
You're going to kill Ashley?
I'm just giving us a different option just to see if
our
answers
asking.
change.
Oh, okay.
Swap in Sasha for Ashley. Let's try it again. Miri, Sinead, Sasha.
I love Sasha to death, but I think we're too similar in that we're extremely opinionated and blunt and direct that we might want to kill each other. So I think it would stay the same.
I'm going to go F Sasha just because of the stories.
And because you think she's a freak.
And I want to experience what a famous night would be like. Just because it would make a great story.
That's true.
I would still marry Miri. And in this case, even though I love Sinead, I would kill her.
Okay, that's fine.
Just for the sake of that one night to see what the SPR experience is like. For the record, we are not misogynists, folks. This is just a game.
Oh, God, no.
Relax.
No, yeah, we're not misogynists. I love women. So, but anyway, I think after that, dude, I'm closing the book on this show. I think that about does it for the most part. And I know I'm going to get a message from Christian, and he's going to name off like a dozen things that we forgot to bring up. But, I mean, that's all I got, man. So, it was a Q&A episode. I didn't expect a whole lot of discussion on it anyway. Even though this is like one of our longest episodes of the Schmoeville podcast somehow. But that's fine. Is that all you got?
I'm good.
There's actually a lot more stuff that I think we glossed, not in the live show, just in general, that I wanted to talk about, but we'll definitely save it for next week, and we'll talk off air about this stuff and make sure we get it on next week. So anyway, I guess that's it for us, guys. Thanks for hanging out with us on Schmoeville Podcast. If you are listening to this on the SK Podcast YouTube channel, thank you, and hopefully you're commenting and engaging with us. But also know that it appears on the Schmoes Know podcast feed, wherever podcasts are found. And if you are listening to it on the podcast feed, just know that the YouTube is there and you can talk to us directly. But we appreciate all your support regardless. Make sure you're subscribing to that. That way you get all the other upcoming shows that the podcast feed is going to be doing. That's all I got. So, Brian, where can the people find you?
You guys can follow me, Brian Davids, on Twitter at BDF331. Also, check out my TV film podcast, where we talk the latest in TV, film, and I also conduct interviews with showrunners like Better Call Saul's Peter Gould, or actors like Jasmine Savoy Brown, who played Evie in The Leftovers Season 2. Coming up, I've got Melissa Bernstein, who's an executive producer on Breaking Bad, Better Call Saul, Halt and Catch Fire, and Rectify.
Awesome. Fantastic. You can check out my stuff on Film Beef. It's a podcast and a YouTube channel. I put all the podcasts up on the YouTube channel as well. We do our weekly movie reviews this weekend. We're going to be talking about Hell or High Water. Our Mr. Robot recaps are going up, and we also are going to start reviewing all the Harry Potter movies in the next couple of weeks. And you can follow me on Twitter at FilmBeefSnell. So I'd greatly appreciate that. And again, feel free to talk to me about whatever you want, whether it's schmoes, movies, TV in general. I'm tweeting a lot about the OC as I'm currently in the middle of season 2. So there's that. Anyway,
I just finished.
There you go. Yeah, we need to start an OC podcast. I'm still dedicated to that idea, and I'm going to convince you to do that with me, whether you like it or not. But anyway, everyone, thank you so much. We will see you next weekend on the Schmoeville